It started as nothing more than a whisper. A low-voiced comment shared between journalists, a vague line buried deep inside a gossip column, a message passed quietly through social media accounts that usually thrived on ambiguity rather than facts. At first, no one took it seriously. Dubai was a city where celebrities came and went every week. Demet Özdemir had been there before. So had Yaman. There was nothing unusual about her name appearing next to the word Dubai. Until one sentence changed the tone of everything. Demet was not alone in Dubai. Those 7 words spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, fan pages lit up with speculation. Screenshots were shared. Anonymous sources suddenly appeared, claiming to have seen something, heard something, noticed a detail that no one else had paid attention to. A shadow in the background of a photo. A reflection on glass. A timing coincidence that felt just a little too precise to be random. At first, Demet said nothing. And Yaman, neither did he. But silence, in moments like these, only fuels imagination. The rumor didn't accuse directly. That was its most dangerous part. It didn't name another man. It didn't describe a clear scene. It simply suggested presence. Company. Someone unseen, but very much there. And in the world of celebrity narratives, that was enough to ignite chaos. Fans began to divide almost instantly. Some dismissed it as another fabricated story designed to provoke reactions and generate clicks. Others, however, pointed to the timing. Why Dubai? Why now? Why had Demet chosen to travel quietly, without the usual posts, without the familiar group of friends tagging along? Every absence suddenly became suspicious. Every delay in posting felt intentional. Meanwhile, those close to Yaman noticed something was different. He wasn't reacting publicly, but behind the scenes, his mood had shifted. People around him described a tension that hadn't been there before. Short answers. Cancelled meetings. A visible irritation whenever Demet's name came up in conversation. Because this wasn't just another rumor. This one hit a nerve. For years, Can and Demet's story had lived in the space between confirmation and denial. Not together, not entirely apart. A past filled with unfinished sentences, glances that lingered too long, interviews where words were chosen carefully, almost painfully so. Dubai reopened questions that had never truly been closed. And according to those close to the situation, Can didn't hear the rumor the way the public did. He heard it differently. He didn't hear gossip. He heard accusation. The claim suggested secrecy. It implied replacement. It whispered that while he remained tied to memories and unresolved emotions, Demet may have already moved on, and done so quietly, far away from the cameras, in a city known for privacy and discretion. That was the part that made Can furious. Not the idea of Demet traveling. Not even the possibility that she wasn't alone. But the implication that he was the last to know. Late that night, Can was seen leaving a private meeting visibly agitated. Witnesses described him as tense, walking faster than usual, phone pressed tightly in his hand. Messages were sent. Calls were made. Some were unanswered. And that silence only deepened the storm. Because when Yaman finally reacted, it wouldn't be with a simple denial. It would be with anger. And the people who had started the rumor had no idea what they had just unleashed. Dubai had always been a city of contradictions. Public luxury, private silence. Flashing lights on the surface, complete discretion behind closed doors. For celebrities, it was the perfect place to disappear without truly vanishing. No paparazzi chaos. No aggressive questions. Just controlled visibility. That was exactly why Demet Özdemir's trip raised eyebrows. She arrived quietly. No airport photos. No fan selfies. No familiar entourage announcing her presence through Instagram stories. For someone so used to public attention, the absence was deafening. And then came the detail that changed everything. A single image surfaced online. It wasn't dramatic. No scandalous scene. No obvious companion standing beside her. Just Demet, captured in a reflective glass surface of a luxury hotel lobby. Elegant, calm, almost distant. But in the background, barely noticeable at first, there was a second silhouette. Blurry. Unclear. But undeniably human. Within minutes, fans zoomed in. Lines were drawn. Colors adjusted. Speculation exploded. Who was that behind her? The rumor found its anchor. Anonymous accounts began claiming they had seen Demet entering a private elevator, not alone. Others said she was spotted at a high-end restaurant, seated at a corner table, accompanied by someone who deliberately stayed out of sight. A man, they said. Quiet. Confident. Someone who knew exactly how to remain invisible. No proof was ever produced. But that didn't matter. The story was already alive. Back in Europe, Yaman was informed piece by piece. Not through headlines. Not through fan accounts. But through people he trusted, friends who knew how these stories worked, and more importantly, how deeply they could cut. At first, he laughed it off. Dubai rumors are always exaggerated, he reportedly said. But laughter doesn't last long when doubt settles in. What troubled Ken wasn't the image itself. It was the pattern. The calculated quiet. The lack of denial. Demet had always been careful with her public image, but this felt different. Intentional, almost strategic. And then came the question he couldn't escape. If there was nothing to hide, why hide at all? Those close to Ken say that's when his mood shifted from irritation to anger. Not explosive anger, not yet, but the kind that simmers, controlled, dangerous because it waits. He started asking questions. Who was in Dubai at the same time? Who had connections there? Who had the kind of access that allowed complete discretion? Names were whispered. None confirmed. Each one worse than the last. And still, Demet said nothing. No statement. No clarification. No subtle denial. Silence can be powerful. But silence can also feel like confirmation. One source claimed Ken sent a message that night, short, direct, emotionally charged. Another insisted it was a call, unanswered. What's certain is this: communication was attempted, and it did not bring relief. Instead, it escalated everything. Because to Ken, this wasn't just about jealousy or pride. It was about respect. For years, their story had been dissected by the public, reshaped by assumptions, rewritten by strangers. Yet, despite everything, there had always been an unspoken rule between them: no surprises. No humiliation. No silent statements that left room for interpretation. Dubai broke that rule. Whether intentionally or not. And when Ken finally realized that the rumor was no longer just online noise, but a narrative being accepted as truth, something inside him snapped. Not publicly. Not yet. But privately, the fury was undeniable. He stopped avoiding the subject. He confronted it head-on in conversations, voice raised, gestures sharper than usual. Those around him described a man struggling to maintain control while fighting an image he could not erase from his mind. Demet. Dubai. Not alone. And the worst part? No one could tell him if it was true. That uncertainty was what pushed him closer to the edge. Because the next step wouldn't be speculation. It would be confrontation. By the time the rumor reached its peak, it was no longer just a story circulating online. It had become a reality that Yaman was forced to live inside. Everywhere he went, the same sentence followed him like an echo. In meetings, on sets, in casual conversations that suddenly fell silent when he entered the room. Demet wasn't alone in Dubai. At first, he tried to ignore it. He told himself that reacting would only give the accusation more power. He had learned that lesson years ago. Silence, he believed, was sometimes the strongest response. But this time, silence felt like surrender. The breaking point came during a private gathering, far from cameras and reporters. A small circle of industry insiders, people who knew both Can and Demet well enough to speak without filters. What was supposed to be a relaxed evening quickly turned tense when someone mentioned Dubai, casually, almost carelessly. "Everyone's talking about it," the voice said. Apparently, it wasn't a solo trip. The room froze. Can's expression changed instantly. The calm mask he had been wearing for days cracked, revealing something raw underneath. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. And when he finally spoke, his voice was nothing like the composed tone people were used to. "Stop," he said sharply. But it was too late. The accusation had been spoken out loud. Witnesses later described the moment as explosive. Can stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. He didn't shout at first. That came later. What came first was disbelief, the kind that hurts more than anger. "You think I don't know how rumors work," he said. "You think I don't see what this implies?" No one answered. Because everyone understood exactly what he meant. The claim didn't just suggest Demet was with someone else. It suggested secrecy. It painted a picture of her moving on quietly while he was left exposed, questioned, and judged. And that was something Yaman could not accept. According to one source present that night, Can slammed his phone down on the table and said words that stunned everyone in the room. "This is not a story," he said. "This is an accusation." That was the moment his anger spilled over. He accused the media of manipulating narratives. He accused anonymous sources of fabricating half-truths. But more than anything, he expressed fury at the idea that Demet's silence was allowing the rumor to breathe. "She knows what this does," he reportedly said. "She knows exactly how this looks." The room remained silent. Some tried to calm him down, reminding him that Demet had always avoided public statements, that reacting would only create more headlines. But logic had no place in that moment. Because emotions had taken over. Later that night, Can left abruptly. What happened afterward remains unclear, but what is certain is that the situation escalated behind closed doors. Messages were exchanged. Voices were raised. Old wounds were reopened. One insider claimed that Can demanded clarity, not explanations for the public, but honesty between two people with too much shared history to pretend indifference. Another source insists that Demet finally responded, not with details, but with distance. And that, more than anything, enraged him. Distance felt like confirmation. By the following morning, the story had changed tone. Media outlets picked up on Can's visible frustration, describing him as furious, unsettled, and deeply affected. Fans noticed his absence on social media, the abrupt cancellation of appearances, the silence that felt heavier than before. The accusation had done its damage. Not because it was proven, but because it was believed. And in Yaman's world, perception often mattered more than truth. The man who had once mastered silence was now trapped by it, surrounded by questions, haunted by images from a city he hadn't been part of, and forced to confront a reality where control was slipping from his hands. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. Because what followed would force both Can and Demet to face something far more dangerous than rumors. A choice. For days, Demet Özdemir's silence dominated every conversation. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt confused or accidental. It was deliberate. Calculated. Almost heavy with intention. And that was exactly why it hurt more than any denial or explanation ever could. Those close to Demet insist she was fully aware of the rumors circulating online. She had seen the comments. She had read the headlines. She knew that every hour without a statement was feeding speculation. Yet, she chose not to intervene. Not because she didn't care. But because she was tired. Tired of clarifying. Tired of correcting narratives she had never written. Tired of having every movement interpreted as a message to someone else. According to one source, Demet had made a quiet decision before even boarding the plane to Dubai. This trip would not be shared, explained, or justified. For the first time in years, she wanted something that belonged only to her. And yes, she was not alone. But not in the way the rumor suggested. The truth, as described by insiders, was far less dramatic and far more personal. Demet had traveled with someone from her inner circle, a trusted presence who had nothing to do with romance, nothing to do with replacement, and certainly nothing to do with provocation. But silence doesn't explain context. And context was exactly what the public lacked. From Demet's perspective, denying the rumor would have meant playing a game she no longer wanted to be part of. It would have meant validating anonymous accusations by responding to them. And she refused to do that. What she didn't anticipate, however, was how deeply that refusal would affect Can. Because while Demet was choosing peace, Can was interpreting distance. And distance, in a story like theirs, felt personal. Sources close to both sides say there was an unspoken expectation. Not of loyalty, but of courtesy. A simple message. A quiet explanation. Something to prevent misunderstanding. That message never came. Instead, what Can received was silence layered on silence. And that silence became a wall. Behind that wall were years of unresolved emotions, unfinished conversations, and a connection that had never truly faded. Dubai didn't create the fracture. It exposed it. When Can finally understood that Demet was not going to break her silence. Not for the media, and not for him, something shifted irreversibly. This was no longer about rumors. It was about boundaries. Demet was drawing one. And Can was standing on the other side of it. Friends described Demet during this period as calm, almost serene. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't running. She was simply refusing to participate in a narrative that reduced her life to a reaction. But calm can be misunderstood. And serenity can look like indifference from the outside. That misunderstanding turned the situation from explosive to final. Because while Can was fighting the accusation, Demet was quietly accepting the consequence. And the consequence was distance. A distance that could no longer be crossed with explanations, apologies, or late-night messages. By the time the rumor began to fade, something else had already settled in its place. Closure. Not spoken. Not announced. But deeply felt. And for Yaman, that realization would become far more painful than the original accusation ever was. Because losing control was one thing. Losing access was another. When Yaman finally reacted, it wasn't with a statement. There was no interview. No dramatic press release. No carefully crafted sentence meant to correct the narrative. Instead, his response came through absence. For someone known for his presence, his voice, his intensity, his unmistakable energy. Disappearing was the loudest reaction he could give. Scheduled appearances were postponed. Meetings quietly cancelled. People who expected anger, explanations, or denials were met with something far more unsettling. Nothing. Those close to Can describe this period as one of emotional withdrawal. Not weakness, control. A deliberate step back, not to punish anyone publicly, but to regain something he felt slipping away, dignity. Because by then, Can understood something crucial. The accusation had already served its purpose. It had fractured what little remained unspoken between him and Demet. It had turned private history into public speculation. And no amount of clarification would put those pieces back exactly as they were before. Media outlets slowly began to shift tone. What had once been framed as an explosive claim now appeared more cautiously worded. Phrases like unconfirmed sources and online speculation replaced certainty. The same voices that had amplified the rumor quietly moved on to the next headline. But for Can and Demet, the damage wasn't something that could simply be archived. Fans noticed subtle changes. Can stopped reacting to questions that mentioned her name. Demet, meanwhile, returned from Dubai unchanged in posture, composed, almost resolute. She didn't address the rumor, but she didn't deny her right to live quietly, either. And that contrast said everything. This wasn't a story of betrayal. It was a story of timing, misinterpretation, and two people choosing different ways to protect themselves. Ken chose confrontation, then retreat. Demet chose silence, then closure. Neither was wrong. But neither led them back to each other. In the end, the accusation that made Yaman furious didn't destroy a relationship. It revealed that it had already reached its limit. What remained was respect from a distance, unresolved emotions locked behind experience, and a shared past that would always invite speculation, no matter how many times both tried to move forward. And perhaps that is why this story refuses to disappear. Because it was never about Dubai. Never about being alone or not alone. It was about two people who once meant everything to each other, learning, painfully, that sometimes silence is not an answer, but a decision.